Hello, this is Jason here, and today we'll be doing on quadratics, which is part of the Sec 2 curriculum. Alright, so let's get started. So starting off, we have quadratic equations. And for quadratic equations, there are around 6 ways to solve it. So there's the highest common factor, identities, grouping, cross multiplication, quadratic formula, and the final secret one that I'm going to review at the end. So starting off, we'll speak about some things to note. Firstly, you have to make sure that your right hand side is equal to 0. So what does that mean? So let's write down a quadratic equation, for example. So x alright, so for example, x squared plus x plus 11 equals to 2. So in order to make this a solvable quadratic equation, we have to make the right hand side equals to 0, which is this part. So we'll move this here, right? So by doing that, we'll minus 2 on both sides. So we'll make it x squared plus x plus 11 minus 2 equals to 0, which would be x squared plus x plus 9 equals to 0, right? Okay, so the second thing to note, that's the main thing to note for quadratic equations, and now we'll move on to the ways to solve the quadratic equations. Firstly, we have highest common factor. So how do you solve using highest common factor? Okay, let's write down an equation, for example, x squared plus 4x equals to 0. So as you can see, x squared equals to x times x, and 4x equals to 4 times x. So as you can see, they have one common factor, which is they both contain an x as a multiple. So we can factorize out the x, and that is by writing an x in front, we will divide an x from both of the numbers. So if I take out the x from x squared, so x squared divided by x equals to x, right? So x times x plus, and 4x divided by x equals to 4, right? So x plus 4 equals to 0. Okay. So when you reach here, you must be thinking, how do we find the value of x? So if you use some common sense and you look at this, in order to get x times x plus 4 equals to 0, one of them have to be 0, right? Because 0 times anything would get you 0, right? X must be equals to 0, or x plus 4 is equals to 0, right? They could both be 0 as well, right? And take note of this or. You cannot write it as and or whatsoever. It must be an or, right? Alright, after figuring out that x equals to 0 or x plus 4 equals to 0, we will so we can say that x equals to 0 or x equals to negative 4. Why? Because if we minus 4 on both sides, so 0 minus 4 equals to negative 4, x plus 4 minus 4 equals to x, and hence x equals to negative 4. Right, so that's the method of highest common factor, and this only works for the equations that only contain all of the numerals there, all of the subjects there, they all have a common factor. In this case, the common factor is x. Alright, so moving on. we have identities as the second way to solve. So what are identities? So basically, if you can see, there are some identities that you have learned previously. Let me list down some of them. So for example, a squared minus b squared equals to a plus b times a minus b, right? So that's the first identity. After this first identity, we have learned another one, which is a plus b squared, the entire thing, equals to a squared plus b squared plus 2ab, right? So if it's minus, we'll make it a minus b squared equals to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab, right? Okay, so these are the identities that you have learned previously. And now we're going to use this in order to solve the quadratic equations. Okay, so let's raise an example. So x squared minus 4 equals to 0. So how are you going to solve that? You see, x squared equals to x squared. Alright, so there's this squared here, and 4 equals to 2 squared, right? There's a square there. So if we use this identity into this, we can get x plus 2 times x minus 2 equals to 0, right? Makes a lot of sense. And thus, when you move on, you can make it so either x plus 2 equals to 0 or x minus 2 equals to 0, because one of them has to be 0 in order for the final answer to be 0, right? So hence, x equals to negative 2 or 2, right? Why? Because here, if you see x plus 2 equals to 0, if we minus 2 on both sides, x would be equals to negative 2. And you see x minus 2 equals to 0. If we plus 2 on both sides, x equals to 2, right? So x equals to negative 2 or 2. So this is one of the easier ones, and I'll give another example. So for example, say x squared plus 4 plus 4x equals to 0. So how can we simplify this? Well, we shall show it in this way. So x squared equals to x squared plus 2 squared plus 2 times 2 times x. Do you see any logic here? If you can compare it to this one, a squared corresponds to x squared, b squared corresponds to 2 squared, 2ab corresponds to 2 times 2 times x. Right? So that means that we can change this expression into x plus 2 squared equals to 0. Right? So in order for x plus 2 squared equals to 0, x plus 2 must be equals to 0, or else this equation wouldn't add up. And hence, x must be equals to negative 2, because negative 2 plus 2 equals to 0. Right? Okay, so that's all for identities for now, unless you learn more identities. So moving on to grouping, so this should be what you have learned in Sec 1 or Sec 2, right? So it's a very easy thing to do. So if you say 3x squared plus 10x plus 8 equals to 0, right? We can make this into 3x squared plus 6x plus 4x plus 8 equals to 0. And how are we going to look at this? So if we look at these separately, right? If we look at this, 3x squared and 6x. So you see 3x squared equals to 3 times x times x. And 6x equals to 3 times x times 2. So if you look at the common factors, they have 3 times x as a common factor. And the one remaining is x and 2. So if we look at 3x squared plus 6x equals to, we factorize out 3 times x, which is 3x. And so 3x squared over 3x equals to, we cancel out, equals to x, right? So 3x times x plus 2. So that's 3x squared plus 6x. And now we move on to 4x plus 8. So 4x equals to 4x equals to 4 times x. And 8 equals to 4 times 2. So if you look at them, they have a common factor as well, which is 4. So we can factorize that out, which would be 4 times x plus 2, right? Because 4x over 4 equals to x, and 8 over 4 is equals to 2, right? So 4x plus 2. So if we formulate this equation again, it will be 3x squared plus 6x plus 4x plus 8 equals to 0 would be 3x times x plus 2 plus 4 times x plus 2 equals to 0. Now when we get this, you are really close to the answer already. Basically, when you're here, you can do 3x times x plus 2 plus 4 times x plus 2 equals to 0. When you're here, you're really close to the final answer. So what you gotta do now is to make this together. Why? Because x plus 2 and x plus 2. Okay, let's sub in y as x plus 2, okay? So it's just a temporary thing. So 3x times y plus 4 times y equals to 0. So do you see the common factor here? The common factor is y, right? So if we factorize out the y, so y times 3x plus 4 equals to 0. And now when we sub back in x plus 2 as y, we can get x plus 2 times 3x plus 4 equals to 0. And following that, you can now solve for x, which is x plus 2 equals to 0, or 3x plus 4 equals to 0. So x equals to negative 2, or 3x equals to negative 4. So when you get to 3x equals to negative 4, you will divide by both sides by 3. Right? So you divide by 3 to make x by itself. And you don't really care about the right hand side. So x equals to negative 4 over 3. Yep. Okay, so that's all for grouping, and now we move on to cross multiplication. Okay, so cross multiplication is one of the most versatile but kind of slow method to use. So, okay, let's raise an example. X squared minus 2x minus 15 equals to 0. So how are you going to solve this, right? Because there's no common factor between all three of them, and you can't use identities, right? And if you really wanted to use the grouping, it will be kind of troublesome. So we'll try out cross multiplication. And how you do that exactly? Now let me show you. So for cross multiplication, you will draw a nice 2 lines on the side, right? So this is just the working, and this is not the It's just like a temporary working that you can just leave it there and it won't get you any marks or whatsoever. So this, you will write x squared and negative 15 here. So you write the one with the x number with the highest power, which is 2 right now, and you write the one with no power. So you leave out this one, okay? You leave out this one. So it's still x squared minus 2x minus 15. So x squared and negative 15. And you're trying to get negative 2x here, right? So if you would find out what x squared is x times x, right? So x times x, you get x squared, okay? Okay, so negative 15. Here is the tricky part about cross multiplication, because negative 15 can be in a lot of ways, right? It could be negative 3 times 5, negative 15 times 1, and all those, right? Negative 5 times 3. And now, if you look, let's try out negative 3 times 5 first. So negative 3 times 5, right? So it will make it, so by cross multiplying, you will do this and you do this, right? So this multiply by this and x multiply by negative 3, okay? So let's try that out. So x times 5 would give you, x times 5 will give you 5x, and x times negative 3 would give you negative 3x. And what you would do here is you would add those two together. But in this case, negative 3x plus 5x would give you 2x, right? Use some simple math, quick math. And that is not what we want to get. We want to get negative 2x, alright? So what we do is we change up our numbers a bit. Now, instead of negative 3, we try negative 5. Instead of 5, we try 3. Okay? So if we cross multiply again, x times negative 5 goes to negative 5x. And x times 3, it goes to 3x. And when we add those two together, it will be negative 5x plus 3x equals to negative 2x. And that is what we're trying to get. So when you see this part, it can be, after you get the correct answer for this, you can use this part, which will be x minus 5 times x plus 3 equals to 0. Magical, isn't it? So after you get this, you can solve it, which would be, so x minus 5 times x plus 3 equals to 0. So x equals to 5 or negative 3, right? You should have learned how to use quick maths to solve what x is after factorizing them out. Okay. So cross multiplication is very versatile and you can basically use it in any situation, but sometimes using identities and the highest common factor is more efficient. Alright, so now moving on to quadratic formula. Like the cross multiplication, quadratic formula is basically something that you can use everywhere, like literally everywhere, in every quadratic equation. Because cross multiplication, sometimes you're limited, because if you get some weird number and it's not a whole number, you can't use cross multiplication. And that's where quadratic formula comes in, okay? So let's say we give an equation, x squared minus x minus 1 equals to 0. So now we have to make this equation into ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Now as you can see, this is the quadratic equation that we're supposed to make it into. And for this, so we can sub in a, b, and c, right? So a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the last number, right? So a equals to 1, b equals to -1 and c equals to -1. You must note that these are plus signs here, so we have to include the negative numbers when we are subbing in the values for a, b, and c, such that they actually form the original number. Alright, so now I'll write down the quadratic formula, which is x equals to -b plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So after formulating this, okay, so this is a very tedious thing because you have to memorize this entire formula. But trust me, it is worth it because you can use it anywhere. Okay, so yeah, so this formula is just subbing in the values to the formula, substituting the values to the formula, and it's a no skill thing, okay? So we take in a, b, and c, we sub it in, so x equals to -1. Take note that you have to put all these values of a, b, and c in brackets, right? You have to include the negative sign, or else it will be a completely different thing. For example, if -b equals to -1, that is equals to 1. But if you exclude the brackets, right? So here you go, -1 equals to -1. See, it's a different thing, right? So we have to include the brackets. So -b plus minus square root -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -1, right? And we divide by 2 times -1. Oh, sorry, 2 times 1. Yep. 2 times 1. So x equals to 1 plus minus square root 1 minus 1 squared equals to 1. So 1 minus 4 times 1 times -1. So 4 times 1 times -1 is -4, right? And if you minus -4, you get plus 4. So it's 1 plus 4 over 2. Right, so x equals to 1 plus square root 5 over 2, or 1 minus square root 5 over 2. Yeah, so that's how you use the quadratic formula. And as you can see, these are not whole numbers, right? They are like inserts, what we call them, right? So they are in their root form, which is not what we can do with cross multiplication, because you can so if you try cross multiplication for this, so it's x squared and then -1 and then and negative x, so x times x, so -1 times 1, so it's negative x and x. So this time you get 0 instead of negative x, which is just that cross multiplication just doesn't work. So quadratic formula is obviously the most versatile thing you can use, but it's tedious to write down and it wastes a lot of energy and pen ink. So yeah, but trust me, the next skill will definitely save your life, which is the ultimate mystery and the blessing of God, and that would be your calculator. So there's a reason why the calculator is called a scientific calculator and there's so many functions. It is made to help you and make your life much easier. Right, so if you go to your calculator real quick, your primary school, your scientific calculator, and you go mode, which is beside the on button, to the left of the on button, you press equation, which is 3, and you press 3 again, which is the ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0, and you key in the values of a, b, and c, right? So we go back to the equation x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals to 0, right? So if we go to this equation, we key in. So a equals to 1 because it's 1x squared, b equals to -2 because it's -2x, c equals to negative 15 because negative 15, right? So we key in the different numbers, right? So you key in the number, you key in a equals to 1 and you press equals, b equals to negative 2, you press equal, c equals to negative 5, equal, and now finally you press equal, and you'll get x1 equals to 5 and x2 equals to 3, negative 3, sorry. Now, if you could do some reverse calculation, you'll realize that x equals to 5, doesn't that mean that x minus 5 equals to 0? And x equals to negative 3, right? Doesn't that mean that x plus 3 equals to 0? So, doesn't it add up that x plus 3 times x minus 5 equals to 0? That is a factorized form of this equation. So, instead of writing the final answer directly and showing people that you cheated, why not just reverse psychology? No, sorry, not. Why not just work your way around and use the values that you have gotten to form the factorized form and cheat your way through the exams, right? However, there are definitely some risks to this, okay? Okay, so if the equation is like negative x squared minus 2x plus 15 equals to 0, if you use that calculator, you'll realize that it is x minus 3 times x plus 5, right? However, you'll see that if you multiply x, the largest, if you try to find x squared, you have to multiply the 2x, right? And you realize that you get x squared. And if you multiply negative 3 by 5, you get negative 15. So this is something that the calculator doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you exactly that which number is negative and all those. So you have to deduce yourself. So you have to double check, and rather than writing it like that, maybe you write 3 minus x times x plus 5. So now you get negative x squared, and this one you get plus 15, right? So that is something that you have to take note of. You have to constantly take note of when you're using this cheat method, right? So now we move on to the common questions, alright? So let's try solving these questions. So let's look at the first question. X minus 2 times x plus 4 equals to 2, right? If you would be so naive to think that x minus 2 equals to 2 or x plus 4 equals to 2, well, you take a fat L like this one on the top right. You take a big fat L because that's wrong. And you know what you have to do? You have to make everything, you have to basically multiply everything, simplify it into its most original version, and add the 2 back inside. Okay, so how we do it is, so x minus 2 times x plus 4 equals to x squared, then x times x, negative 2 times x, so it's minus 2x, x times 4 is plus 4x, wait, is plus 4x, and negative 2 times 4 is minus 8, equals to 2. So now what you do is you move this 2 back in. So you minus 2 on both sides, you get x squared minus plus 2x minus 10 equals to 0. And now, now you could use the calculator cheat method, and you could deduce that, oh no, it's not a whole number. Whatever shall I do? And here, this is what you have to do. You have to sub in the entire quadratic formula. Okay? You will sub in the quadratic formula if you realize from the calculator that it's not a whole number. Alright? So yeah, or not a whole number or not a fraction. Yeah. So yeah, that is the thing you have to do, and yeah, because you have to understand that you have to constantly make the right hand side equals to 0. You cannot leave it as a 2 or something, because that will just not work out. Okay? So let's move on to the next question. Find k if x equals to 3 is a solution for the equation x to the x squared plus kx plus 15 equals to 0. So for this type of questions, right, if they gave you a solution, if they gave you a root or a solution for x, and they ask you to find an unknown in the equation, what you just gotta do is, since you already know what x would be, why not just sub in x into that, right? Because if you know that this thing would make x equals to 3, why not just reverse it and make this x equals to 3 such that you know that this equation will be equals to 0. So 3 squared plus 3k plus 15 equals to 0. And from there, you can realize that 9 plus 15 plus 3k equals to plus 3k equals to 0. Hence, 3k equals to negative 9 minus 15, which will be negative 24. So k equals to negative 8. Okay, so when you're here, you can double check x squared plus 8. No, sorry. X squared minus 8x plus 15 equals to 0. Use your calculator cheat method. So 1 minus 8 plus 15, get x minus 3 times x minus 5 equals to 0. Boom, that's the answer. Right, so next question, we have find two consecutive odd numbers such that the sum of their squares is 74. Here, if you would use some common sense and you'd think consecutive odd numbers. So if we let the lower number be x, so the higher number would definitely be x plus 2, right? X plus 2, right? Because consecutive odd numbers means that they have to have, there has to be one even number between them, and the next one would then be the next odd number. Thus, if x squared plus x plus 2 squared equals to 74, can x squared plus x squared plus 4 plus 4x equals to 74. So 2x squared plus 4x minus 70 equals to 0. Now you can use whatever method you want other than you can only, so now you can use either the calculator cheat method, or you sub in the entire quadratic formula, or you can do cross multiplication, right? So here I use the calculator cheat method right now. So so right now you see, according to the calculator, x equals to 5 or negative 7. But if you were to write that out originally, it will be x minus 5 times x plus 7. This doesn't make sense, right? Because we have a 2x squared and we have a 70. So what we need to do, we have to 2x minus 10 times x plus 7 equals to 0. Now it makes much more sense, right? Because 2x times x equals to 2x squared. Okay, and negative 10 times 7 equals to negative 70. So the middle one, which is 4x, you could calculate. So this is 14x minus 10x, which is 4x, right? So you have to take note of these traps in the calculator. And you have to actually use your brain to be able to implant this how to make this thing into an equation, right? How to apply this equation into real life. You have to be able to think